Hello and welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deegan. On the show today, the curious case of fictional experts. Is AI driving a credibility problem for sourcing academics? Media writer Maggie Brown and broadcaster Alex Zane discuss this, plus the rise of branded podcasts. Also on the programme, Ofcom puts the brakes on Radio 2 spin-off. Phil Riley from Boom Radio is here to assess the damage. All that plus Podcast Festival Cross Wires gets a new creative director. Owner Dino Sofos is here to reveal who it is. And in the quiz, we enter the Frequency Funhouse. That's all happening in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. So welcome back to the Media Club. Lovely to see you both. Alex, you've made it into the club. Well done. You're in. You're safe. You're on the list.
Thank you.
But who else would you like to add?
Well, I would like to add this week especially Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann to the club. They are the showrunners, co-creators and lead writers on the wonderful TV series The Last of Us, which has just been recommissioned for a third season, despite the second season not even having launched yet. And this leads into a bigger topic for me, which I know I've chewed your producer Matt Hill's ear off repeatedly. But what's exciting about this for me is, as a huge lover of video games, we finally now seem to have entered an era where studios have worked out that rather than trying to smash a square peg through a round hole and take the ever more complex narratives that video games have now, up to 20 plus hours of storytelling, into a 90-minute movie, we are now getting quality TV series which do justice to these video games. The Last of Us being an example, Fallout, The Witcher, and it looks set to continue. I mean, we've got God of War, Mass Effect, Gears of War TV shows coming out in the next couple of years. So I think, as well as them being geniuses in their field, I think what they're doing is setting a new standard for video game adaptations.
Well, they're welcome additions. I mean, Last of Us, for a video game TV series, the people who played the game liked the TV series as well.
Yes, and very smartly, the creator of the video game, Neil Druckmann, was brought in, which it seems insane that you wouldn't do that, but for years, people haven't done that, and Hollywood is still going to be making terrible movies from video game IPs. I mean, you just need to look at Borderlands earlier this year, which was borderline unwatchable. So it's going to continue, but it seems like they finally worked out the sweet formula to make good video game adaptations.
The Minecraft movie, which I've not caught yet. Interesting, obviously huge video game IP. Perhaps not the greatest movie, but a very successful
Have you
film.
seen the footage that's doing the rounds at the moment?
Where they forgot to put the heads on.
No, this is even crazier. This is in America, audiences, young males primarily, going absolutely nuts when Jack Black utters iconic lines from the game, but to the point that theatre staff are threatening to quit because they are chucking popcorn around, they're throwing drinks over people. It looks like absolute carnage. And
but is this just engaged kids with the movies for the first time at cinemas, gets them into the cinema even if they trash it?
I mean, that is a real positive spin on what looks like ultra-violence.
Okay, Maggie, lovely to see you.
I don't think I can match that.
Who would you add to the club?
Well, I've had a bit of a problem, really, because I do think that we're in such a terrible time that I just cannot avoid talking about the politics of Trump and all the rest of it. But you've said I can have two people because of this dilemma I find myself in. Well, one of my good old friends, Jonathan Miller, who some people will remember from he still writes for the Spectator. He's a very sort of controversial, funny writer. But he also, before that, worked on the Sunday Times, and he did an awful lot of work with Rupert Murdoch and the Murdochs in the launching of Sky Television and all the rest of it that happened in the late 1980s. And now I happen to be one of his kind of friends, I suppose you might say. And we both took part in this rather extraordinary C-SPAN live hour-long debate about the British newspapers when they were big newspapers. And anyway, suddenly to my amazement, he has brought out a book which is called The Shock of the News. And about a month or two ago, he sent me a draft copy to look at, which I did save him one or two embarrassments over. But anyway, today I got the news that it's been published, and he is, I think, going to be quite an interesting person to look out for. Now, I cannot remember the publisher now. This is the awful thing. So this is hopeless of me.
Don't worry, we will dig it out and put it in the show notes.
But it is the most. It's very frank about some of the people who he worked with, and this, of course, includes Rupert Murdoch and the family and all of the things, the politics of that as well. And it is an incredibly good read, but it's a very irreverent read as well. You find yourself laughing all the way through. And he's a Brit. This is the funny thing, a Brit who went to America and went to university at Ann Arbor, now quite a famous university for all sorts of reasons. And I'm actually quite proud that he's brought it out.
Well, don't say that we never do any research on this show. So you're talking about a thing you did in 1988 on C-SPAN, and we've got a clip. Let's have a look.
We're waiting on another call. Quickly, and there's not enough time to deal with all this, but television is very much in the forefront here. Maggie, there are how many channels of television to watch if you live in London?
But there are just 4 channels at the moment. In fact, broadcasting in this country is very heavily regulated. We're on the brink, I think, of something like a fairly major expansion, but it won't, I don't think, really come into effect until the mid-90s, and we should be moving, I think, then towards perhaps a dozen or so channels. We have no real cable television over here. That's the key thing.
Let me point out to our viewers that they're looking at the British Telecom Tower that sits in the middle of London, and the television signal that from this room has to go through there.
See, still doing basically as a media podcast you were doing in 88.
The only problem is I think I sound a bit like the Queen.
They love it. They love that in America. If you're ever a Brit on anything in America, you feel like you're super posh straight away.
Well, my son said, "Mum, you sound very well spoken," and I thought, "Oh, really?" This is just shows how much you change. Anyway, thank you actually for that clip, because it saves me the embarrassment of not remembering very much about it.
Who's your second edition?
But my second is far more serious, really. I've actually hardly been watching any proper television because I have just been so completely devastated, really, by the events of America. I've got 2 daughters, as you know, and grandchildren who live in America. The whole unbelievable thing that we're going through now, and the election of basically somebody I regard as a lunatic, really. So I have been reading and watching. And the person that I would like to nominate, who probably will never ever see this podcast, is Edward Luce, who's the Financial Times' American editor, who has been writing the most direct and hugely critical but on target columns, and whether they make a difference. He knows they won't make a difference because Trump isn't going to read anything like that. He goes on his own business. But there is this, as you probably know, the derangement syndrome of Trump, which is, TDS, which everybody's talking about. But in his latest column, he said yesterday that Trump hasn't a clue about what he has unleashed, and that today there is not a school of foreign policy or realism or whatever it is that can explain his actions, or I think he means sensible people. So I actually I would there are many people I would actually nominate in the way that they've been trying to take down Trump. But unfortunately, it's not going to have any real impact.
Also, sort of this time around, Trump is emboldened, it's having quite a chilling effect on press. They're making, obviously, decisions about not adding people to the White House press pool. Obviously, norms aren't a thing he particularly likes to follow anyway.
Yes.
But is... And if you are press, it does give you pause when you write editorials like that, doesn't it?
It does, but it's almost as if people are thinking that they're almost on the brink of some kind of Americanized fascism, and they are worried about the development of this, not just crushing of journalists or people in the know, but just targeting people who do not agree with you. And I think I find too the sheer amount of just rudeness that they show, this lack of complete kind of, I don't know what the word is, humility. I also find the attitude, I find the American government's attitude now towards, all sorts of things. It's not even that you're concerned about the way they seem not to care about Gaza. Let's turn it into a nice, plaza for people to go sunbathing. It's just the whole approach, which I have never been so deeply shocked. And upset.
It's interesting that you say that you've been unable to take your eyes off the news, because I've found myself actually having to go the other way. I used to have the BBC News on constantly in the background, keeping up to date with everything. But I just find what is happening so terrifying, and the effect that he's having, especially in the second term, on the globe with these tariffs, and the fact that it's affecting us, every person sitting in this room, everyone listening is being affected by what he is doing across the globe is being affected. I'm just like, I just can't. I think it's making people who are already struggling. I think it's creating a selfishness in people that is unnatural, that isn't something that they would normally be, because I think people are just very much focused on having to survive this, and working hand to mouth is a reductive way of putting it, but I do think we are all really, if you aren't polarized already, if you do sit in this middle sphere, not on the far left or the far right, in this middle sphere, you are just shutting down to this because it's almost too much to handle.
I mean, there was some, I think, interesting stuff that Deborah Turnis from BBC News was saying, is actually if you're running a news network, trying to work out ways to deliver content to people, because they're turning off the news channels, or they're unsubscribing from certain feeds. But obviously the value is still there to deliver the news. And particularly, I think, in the States, where people have their own facts, and it's very difficult to sort of cut through. I was watching some of the Fox business news stuff.
Exactly.
So that kind of main Fox News was sort of ignoring all the tariff issues, but the business channel had to sort of cover it. But it's that sort of, when reality enters their own narrative, it's such big changes with tariffs, even they had to cover it. Let's go on to first story of the week. It's courtesy of the Press Gazette, who've been running an interesting investigation into fake commentators. Alex, what's this one all about?
I mean, this is astonishing. It is a really fascinating article, which I suggest everyone read. But it seems to have been a natural evolution of something that was happening already. Basically, what is happening now is that there's a booming business, which is PR companies offering up for a fee commentators on XYZ to any media outlet. But, why pay for an actual commentator or source an actual commentator when you can just make one up? Because that's what's happening. Press Gazette ran an investigation and found that at least one of these commentators, who had been offering opinions on a variety of subjects across the board, actually didn't exist. And it was quite simply using our friend ChatGPT, or at least another AI system, to generate all the information they needed to give an opinion on X subject, and then selling it to the outlet. Now, why is this happening? If you're a journalist and you don't want to have to go and source, a guest or a commentator to give an opinion on this, and there's a PR company going, well, for this amount, we'll source them, then that's your job done, and you assume the responsibility then lies with the PR company not to just make it up.
Well, also there's people putting in all these quotes basically to get a link on a news website to kind of give some Google juice back to the article. I mean, commentators have had a bit of a bad name anyway over the years. Why worry about a voice on a stick when you can just make them up?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I think there are two problems here. I think the first problem is AI gets things wrong a lot. The number of times I've had to correct ChatGPT and gone, that's simply wrong. And then ChatGPT has actually gone, oh, I'm sorry, you're right. And then I've gone, don't worry, it's okay, because I'm terrified that in the future, when it becomes sentient, it will go.
I was nice to you in the early days.
That's what I'm doing. So there's that aspect that simply things can be wrong, and some of these commentators, these fictional commentators, are commentating on quite serious issues, often health, mindfulness, things that have an actual effect on people. But I mean, this has been going on for a while. I mean, certainly in the film industry, we all remember Bunker 15, the PR website that basically paid critics who were registered critics on Rotten Tomatoes to give glowing reviews to films to up their score from rotten to fresh. So this has been existing for a while, and now someone's just gone, why pay an actual person when we'll keep the cash and use AI?
I mean, Maggie, I sort of think back to like Nick Davis sort of terming journalism early on, this sort of this PR news combination. I mean, it partly benefits titles, so whether that be like things like The Sun Online or Mail Online, that are generating lots and lots of news stories and need lots and lots of coverage. And they mentioned things like Response Source in this article, which are great services where journalists can go, hey, we need someone to talk about X, and PRs can respond.
And it cuts the time, to actually fix it up.
Because they've got 10 articles to write in a day.
Yes, it's a terrible indictment, really, that we don't have enough journalists and maybe doing their own research, but they have to show that they're being productive. I found the whole thing actually very, very interesting, because I've been trying to work out what I think about AI, and I was sort of hoping, I was listening, I don't know if you took part of it, there was a Reuters a seminar about it a couple of weeks ago, and I was trying to believe what a lot of the people there who were internationally selected were saying, which seemed to suggest that AI hadn't really made any impact, and they didn't quite understand how it was working. And I thought, well, maybe it is quite benign. But this particular article, and the fact it comes so close to home, it's the UK Press Gazette, had me I was absolutely mesmerised by it. And I think I'm just looking at Rob Moore is the journalist who did it, along with Dominic Ponsford. And I think it would be really interesting to maybe have a further discussion with him about it, because you can only ever put so much into a written article, and there must be a lot more information building up.
I think there was a kind of scratching the surface of this. This was like they noticed a few and started chasing them down.
I wondered genuinely how dangerous it is, though, because I think for a long time, you said earlier, commentators get a bad rap. And I don't know how much weight people genuinely attach to these opinions that are thrown in from X. I do think we live in an era now where there are so many different ways to get information, reviews. What people have tended to start to do is find someone they trust, whether it's a YouTube channel that they choose to get their information from, a particular journalist, a newspaper, a magazine. They keep returning to them. Once you realize who your opinions mesh with, who you trust, who you feel is authentic, then you do return to them. And all these other, tidbits of commentary here and there are just noise to you. I think most people are discerning enough to know what is real and who they trust.
Well, I hope you're right. I mean,
I've got to be optimistic about something.
Well, I mean, when you think of all of the fuss that the adolescence four-parter has created, a lot of that is going back to, in a way, the misuse of online information. And I'm not saying it's anywhere near that, but it would be nice to think, not nice, it seems to me important to know whether you are actually speaking to a proper person or not.
I think a lot of it plays into sort of the speed of the media and business model changes, need to knock out these articles quickly. Here's an option of doing it. The new service matches me with people that want to say it. I grab that, I give it a cursory Google. Oh, she's appeared and she's done other things. Oh, that's fine. Drop it in. It's like the pace of change is allowing these people to
Yes, except that I live in the country quite a lot in Wales, and I'm a great reader of all the local papers, which are actually flourishing, the weeklies. And when I say flourishing, and some of them are actually created by just people in villages who maybe they're retired and they're adding in information. And it's interesting that when you actually see what they're writing about, it's about real things. And I don't think that this kind of attempt to disguise that you're giving out information, artificially, as it were, I don't think it's reached them. And I've been quite impressed, actually, with the quality of the of the local press.
Well, again, that's back to the technology, in that can go the good way, in that some individuals can set up a thing that previously would take a load of cash to do it.
It's not all Reach, Everybody thinks Reach has got rid of all the journalists, blah blah blah, but they actually haven't.
And that's authentic as well. That's real people writing real stories.
The paper's being sold in a particular either village or town or small city or whatever it is. So it's more difficult really to pull the wool, I think, over people who know what's what in their bit of the world.
Whereas I host a YouTube channel called Cinema Surgery, and one of these algorithms saw the word surgery, and so we got an email which was clearly generated by AI, offering us a specialist to talk about Ozempic and its uses, and it's like, we're a movie channel. We talk about movies, and that's AI basically sourcing the word surgery and just sending out an email.
Yes, it's happening a lot, I think.
Okay, Ofcom has blocked BBC Radio 2's spin-off from launching on DAB in a move they said would likely have an impact on commercial operators of particular significance, Boom Radio. Joining us now from Boom Radio is the CEO, Phil Riley. So, Phil, if it wasn't for you, licence fee payers would get a lovely BBC Radio 2 spin-off station, and you've stymied it. You've stopped them.
Yes. It's all my fault. So
this is the BBC. We've talked about it on the show a little bit before. Wanted to launch a spin-off station for the over 50s. You've got a station that's been around 3 years now?
4 years.
4 years now. That caters for that audience and has done pretty well. Ofcom did a consultation and they're not so keen on allowing it to take place. There was some... This week they did a report saying that they were minded not to allow it to go forward. Obviously, I guess you think that's the right decision.
Yeah, I think all of the rational evidence, if you look at all the rational evidence and the rules that they have to work by, it was a sensible decision that they took based on what was in front of them and the structure of how they got to make these decisions.
When I looked at it, the BBC, when I looked at it, Ofcom weren't that convinced for quite a lot of the BBC's arguments for some of the stations that they did allow. That was Radio 3 Unwind, Radio 1 Dance and Radio 1 Anthems. But your one particularly that they didn't like because it affected you. They weren't so bothered about the others affecting Global and Bauer. They were sort of big enough and ugly enough to look after themselves. Were you surprised by that actually it was more that you existed, that's why they blocked it?
I think it was a combination of two things. The first of which was I don't think those other three stations they felt were going to be as big an entrant into the marketplace. So they felt anybody could have coped with them, whether or not they were part of a big group or not. But you're right, the biggest station that the BBC had proposed to launch was going to affect one of the few independent radio stations that's making a mark in the industry. So I think it's the combination of those two things, Radio 2 Extra being quite a big new entrant and us being particularly vulnerable because we're an independent and not part of a large group. Although, having said that, I know that the Radio Centre's view always was, actually, it doesn't matter whether a radio station is part of a big group or an independent. What matters is it going to be damaged by the presence of a new BBC station? But that's the view they took.
Yeah, Ofcom said that it would have probably affected your audience maybe by about 20%. Do you think they got the right numbers?
I think their numbers were a little low, and in fact, one of the reasons why they were a little low is Ofcom themselves didn't believe the BBC when the BBC said one of the benefits of Radio 2 is Radio 2 Extra is it will be promoted on Radio 2 itself, which is like a super promotional access for this new radio station. We took the BBC at their word, and the BBC said they could get 21 million hours delivered by this service. Ofcom's number ended up being slightly lower than that, 15, 16, 17 million. And, that probably accounts for a big chunk of the gap between how badly affected Ofcom thought we'd be and our numbers, which were slightly higher in the high 20s up to mid 30s. But whatever the number was, it was a significant number, a significantly negative effect, and I think Ofcom were right on the basis of that to say, hang on, we've got a job here not to mess up fair and effective competition, and that's what this would do.
I mean, obviously, you're happy with the result. I mean, this is another example that the BBC is sort of stuck a little bit. Ofcom tasked the BBC with increasing younger audiences, increasing audiences for C2DEs, which they said this would have a good go on, particularly the C2DEs for older audiences. I mean, what can the BBC do? They're there to be universal for everyone. They've tried to do something here. It's been pushed back, probably for good reason. But shouldn't the BBC have some flexibility to try and grow and develop?
They should always have the flexibility to grow and develop. But I think the privileged position that they're in mandates that they try and be innovative. And to be honest, an oldie station playing ABBA and Elvis is just not that innovative. They need to try and do a bit harder, I would say, in terms of thinking outside the box if they want to get stuff clear.
I mean, Ofcom talked about the uncertainty of this sort of freezing investment decisions for radio groups, or even maybe having to pull back services if the BBC was allowed to go ahead with everything they'd suggested. Does this mean more new things for Boom now that this reprieve has happened?
I think we'll be looking very, very seriously at trying to expand our portfolio. We're not in the position that Global and Bauer are in, where even preemptively they decided to stick out a load more radio stations because they've got the wherewithal and the resources to do that. We clearly couldn't expand whilst this was hanging over our heads. Now it's not hanging over our heads. Yeah, we'll be thinking very, very seriously about doing something expansive.
Phil Riley, thank you very much. I mean, Maggie, BBC are sort of damned if they do, damned if they don't on everything. They've had a lot that's been let through with this agreement. Obviously, they're not going to get Radio 2 extra, but they were doing sort of what the government and Ofcom want them to do.
Well, they're trying all the time, aren't they, to be universal. That's the big thing that they have to do. And at one end, they do children's television and other things, which I regard as a mega thing that they have to keep doing. And at the other end, obviously, they are... You just look at the programmes which are very popular, and they're probably old people's programmes, really. I mean, they're doing brilliantly. And as our kind of age of dying seems to be going up all the time, it's obviously not going to fall away that much. I have a very old-fashioned view about the BBC, which has annoyed people, but oddly, I was being asked about 6 months ago, would I join yet another book about what do we do about the BBC? And I kind of repeated my position, which is that I actually do believe in a universal service. I do think probably a form of licence fee is necessary. I don't think it should be passed over simply as a state thing that will somehow get grants. It needed to have a degree of independence, all those things, and that we would be feeling, if we lost the BBC, that something really important had gone out of being, if you like, British. And I was sort of told, So I thought, yes, well, fine, I don't mind, because I actually think that, and I can't write a piece and saying it's all dreadful and we shouldn't have it, and it's charging people all this money they don't want to pay. An X number aren't paying it anymore, etc. So I just sort of bided my time. And what I'm finding out now, when I look at the Voice of the Listener and Viewer and all the rest of it, and I look at actually also the chairman of the BBC, who of course used to be a BBC employee and was one of the John Birt crowd. I'm finding myself feeling perhaps more on safe ground, because why would we want to fragment our already quite fragmented nation further and do away with the BBC? And why should we not cherish the fact, whatever they decide to do about certain people like Stephen Sacker, we have journalists who, certainly for the World Service, and we know BBC monitoring as well, remember, are attempting to purvey truths, through our own eyes, but we do have a very important role to play. So I'm actually now saying that I hope the BBC, we know it's lost funding, we know it's smaller than it should be, or maybe will be in future. I'm not against all of the other expansion and all the other offers that are around, but I still think we need to keep the BBC.
Do you think, Alex, just quickly, that tumultuous world, strange things happening everywhere, actually builds a better case for them going into a license fee renewal? Or are we at a time when it's going to be difficult for them to keep the show on the road?
I mean, I from my end, what I can say is that I think the real struggle is when it comes to just the way, and it's interesting that you say, the age of dying is going up, so, it's not going anywhere soon. But death is inevitable, and there is a younger generation who simply are not watching TV in that way. And it doesn't surprise me that the BBC is moving more shows to YouTube. I had a very interesting conversation with someone who works at ITV who says the majority of their content is actually watched on YouTube. And I think...
Well, with younger people, yes.
With younger people,
yes.
but interestingly, increasingly families now, because
yes.
because you have the smart TVs and because obviously the YouTube app is sitting right there, and if the kids are like, let's watch this, I want to watch it on YouTube, families are going to start gravitating towards YouTube. And the problem that any streaming service like ITVX or BBC iPlayer has that YouTube doesn't have and that Netflix doesn't have is the fact that those streaming services have this universal appeal and this variety of content, whereas factually the people who would use ITVX are people who are already watching ITV1. So the idea of bringing in new viewers to your streaming service like ITVX by pushing the envelope isn't going to happen, and the viewing figures for ITVX shows back that up. When they have made a piece of original programming that wouldn't sit naturally on ITV1 for ITVX, it has been viewed so much less than a similar kind of programming that would have sat well on ITV1.
Yeah, we've definitely seen ITV and Channel 4 rolling out YouTube channels around channel brands too.
Well,
okay, just
Channel 4 have been, very much in the forefront of all of that. I don't deny any of that, but I still say that even in this very fast evolving world, that there is a role for the BBC, and I would say I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but I would not be at all surprised if the more kind of vicious attacks that have happened on the BBC, for example, 14 years of Conservative rule and the cutbacks that they've had to go through, I would not be at all surprised, because we're seeing it already. There's a more generous approach to the BBC by our current government. Well, and I think that's going to continue.
Well, it's definitely something that, of course, we will keep an eye on. Okay, when we return, we tell you some big podcast-related stories of the week. I'll see you in a sec.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company, where this week we've been thinking about analytics. Downloads tend to be treated as the be-all and end-all, but are they? How do you measure the amount of time people have actually spent listening to your show? Should you focus on getting more people through the door or on keeping them coming back? And how accurate is data anyway? For answers to these questions or anything else to do with podcast marketing, head to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
Here at the Media Club, we love bringing on great guests each week to dive into the most gripping stories in the media, but assembling such a star-studded lineup isn't always easy, especially with guests travelling from all over the country. That's why we love recording at Podshop. Their Shoreditch studio is perfectly located, just an 8-minute stroll from Liverpool Street Station, making it super convenient for us and our guests. If you're searching for the perfect place to host your next podcast, Podshop makes it easy to create high-quality shows without the hassle. And right now, you can get 25% off your first booking at Podshop Studios, where we record every week, just by using the code Media Club when you book at podshoponline.co.uk. That's Media Club when you book online at podshoponline.co.uk. Welcome back. There's been a few champagne corks flying around the media industry this week as new ventures are launched. A new super indie's been created in the audio sector with Listen, Platform Media, Goldhawk and Folding Pocket combining to become what they call a podcasting super group with over 80 staff. All these companies had investment from PodX. Meanwhile, Avalon has acquired a minority stake in one of the production companies behind Adolescence. The investment in All Made Up will include the opening of an office in Liverpool. It comes as rumours of a second series of the drama have been circulating. And back to podcasting, where the Crossed Wires Festival has just announced that Radio 1 DJ Greg James is going to become their creative director. Co-founder of the festival and of Persephonica, a podcast production company, joins us from Sheffield. Hi, Dino.
Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Why have you added Greg to lead your creative efforts of Crosswires?
So Greg came last year along to Crosswires as kind of one of our mates, but also did a sort of impromptu show. One of the things with Crosswires is we have big shows like the Adam Buxton podcast. This year we've got Help I Sexted My Boss, but we want to do the kind of impromptu events that you had to be there for. And Greg hosted a show with Alice Levine called Now That's What I Call Podcasting, which was basically made up on the hoof and was their journeys in podcasting. And he had such a great time. And then he hung around afterwards and he, took some selfies and he came to the after parties and he came to the Fringe. And afterwards he just said, I love this so much. There's nothing like this. Can I come again next year? And we went away and had a think. So Alice Levine, who's my other co-founder, and we just were like, do you know what? Should we just see if Greg wants to come on board officially and be part of the journey over the next few years and growing the festival? And he said yes straight away, which is great.
He's someone who loves the podcast. He does about 70 of them.
Yeah, exactly.
What is it, do you think, that obviously he's a radio person, he's an audio person, but is it the medium, do you think, that makes him excited? You were originally a radio person. Is it just about ears? Is it not about the platforms?
I think the thing about Crosswires specifically, there's obviously lots of festivals and events that you and I go to, Matt, in kind of windowless rooms with warm glasses of white wine where we talk about CPM rates. But we didn't think there was much around which had the energy of kind of like Edinburgh or Glastonbury or Hay for festivals where it's fans, it's actual listeners getting together. And I think one of the things that Greg really liked about it was that sense of community, because it's quite a solitary experience listening to podcasts, right? We listen on the dog walk or doing the shopping or in bed even. But there's more and more so we're seeing this increasingly with, Rest is Politics playing Wembley or Miss Me playing Hackney Empire. Lots of people are keen to get together and experience podcasts with other listeners and that sense of community. And I think that's what we really captured about at Crosswires, and what makes Greg really excited, as you say, as a kind of audio nut. And, with Tailenders, which who knows, we might even see that popping up at Crosswires this year. But it's about getting in amongst it with the fans. And that's really what he loves about it. And that's what we've captured, I think.
And so what are the dates for Crosswires this year?
So it's the 4th to the 6th of July this summer in Sheffield. I don't know if we've mentioned that yet. And we really take over the city for the weekend. So we've announced Help I Sexted My Boss. That sold out pretty much immediately, actually. No Such Thing as a Fish also headlining. And then we're going to be announcing the next wave of big acts, and there's some really big podcasts in there on Tuesday, so next Tuesday the 15th. So if you sign up at crosswires.live, head to the website, you'll be able to find out about the rest of the lineup and sign up for tickets. And we've already got Greg working, so we announced his involvement today, but he's already, if you're working at a podcast company, if you make a podcast, you might get Greg James calling you up, hustling, trying to get you on our lineup this year. So don't be surprised if you get a call from Greg.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dino.
Cheers, Matt.
Maggie and Alex are still with me. Alex, you've got a new show starting, a brilliant new podcast, which I feel very jealous of. I'm not saying I don't like what I do here. I'm very happy. It's lovely to be here with you. I've got some water to the side of me, but I think you have sort of beaten me.
This is absolutely no slight on the wonderful surroundings in which we sit, and we both know that this is at the upper end of a podcast studio, having recorded in various spit and sawdust locations. But yes, I am hosting a new podcast at the Savoy called the Savoy Originals, and it is wonderful and slightly unusual and a little ridiculous to be welcoming guests into the royal suites of the Savoy Hotel to sit down and record a podcast, and yet that is what I am doing. And that water that you are sipping would be replaced with some Laurent Perrier champagne as our glorious sponsor. But the podcast itself, yes, I mean, the Savoy has this wonderful history of creatives staying there. So we have collaborated on this podcast, which sees me interviewing people at the very top of their game in numerous fields, whether it's the culinary world, whether it's entertainment, whether it's sport, people who have genuinely achieved hugely original things in those fields. So, for example, the episode that launched today sees me sit down with the wonderful Rob Brydon and talk through his career. And we tend to like to do it chronologically. So we start with their childhood and then how they first began to get interested in whichever field it is. In Rob's case, entertainment, and then on to, what it's taken to actually get there. And with Rob Brydon, it was just fascinating to hear about, in the 90s, him watching Steve Coogan on TV, idolizing Steve Coogan and wanting a similar career, while he himself at the time was a presenter on a cable shopping channel. Only to then fast forward 15 years and he's obviously on the meta masterpiece The Trip with Steve Coogan as a close friend. But one of the things that keeps coming up with so many of the guests who again have come from various different backgrounds, whether it's Gordon Ramsay, whether it's Frankie Bridge, whether it's the comedian Nick Mohammed or Rob Brydon, is the things that it's required of them to get where they are. And it's this drive, this self-belief, and in Rob's case, a certain amount of tenacity. He tells a wonderful story about basically writing to Kevin Costner and the production team behind Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and going, I'm an actor, I'd love to be in this film, would you cast me? And never hearing back. But it's just great to really find people being so candid, which I think a lot of people, I think we live in an era where people are a lot more candid than potentially they used to be. But just sort of hearing Gordon Ramsay talk about how, despite running so many Michelin-starred restaurants, he doesn't enjoy eating in his own restaurant because his background is from a working class upbringing, and the pomp and ceremony of being waited on by people sits uneasily with him.
Is there, obviously, a lot of these people kind of grind it out. I mean, Gordon Ramsay and Rob Brydon, two examples, they worked hard for a long time to get to their success. Is there anything else that unites some of these guests that you think, actually... Maybe
it's drinking champagne.
Maybe. That's the sort of secret of... Is there a sort of secret of their success? Is it just, hard work?
No, it's interesting. Luck does come up a lot. And I think you can sometimes, when you hear people say that, you're just like, it's humility. You're just going, luck. But genuinely, it plays a huge factor in all of these people we've interviewed. In my own career, like I was doing stand up to about 7 people at the Edinburgh Festival, and 3 of those people happened to be producers at MTV looking for new presenters, and that was how my career started. And that was pure chance, serendipity. So yes, luck. But
is there a bit of like factor. Sort of people who are lucky are those who work quite hard? Like even in that example, you'd got to the point where you were happy to go on stage and you'd organise ability to do it, and you'd got there and you're doing your thing, so that you're in a place to then be lucky that when those MTV producers were in front of you. Yeah,
I agreed. I think that comes back to this idea of self-belief and I guess thick skin to a certain extent. I mean, to use Gordon Ramsay as an example again, when he talks about being forged in the fires of Marco Pierre White's kitchen, and how so many people fell by the wayside and simply couldn't hack the intensity of that space, and how he actually thrived on it and he learned so much. And, that comes from just, I guess, you don't want to say the X factor, but that thing that just feeds you and drives you more than it drives other people.
Okay, we can get that podcast wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you're listening to this one. And next week, I think, on the show, Olivier winner Leighton Williams.
I know, it's fantastic. Yes, obviously he just won the Olivier for Titanic, which just to circle back to something I was saying at the start about cinema, I think the fact that Titanic, which is, if you don't know, this theatre production, which is a retelling of the events of the Titanic, the film Titanic, told by Celine Dion, who hijacks a museum tour and retells it through her eyes. And Leighton Williams actually plays and has won the Olivier for being the iceberg in that play. And what excites me about that is where big budget cinema is getting more and more homogenized. It seems like high-end theatre is still a place where you get unique, off-the-wall ideas that are being rewarded.
I agree with that totally. Yes. Have you seen The Seagull? Have you seen that?
I haven't.
Yes.
No.
Oh, it's just fantastic.
Leighton, stone cold performance. Right. On that note,
how long is it? The podcast. How long?
It's 60 minutes, roughly 60 minutes with each guest. Which
I'm hooked.
Thank you.
Okay, join us after the break when we'll be entering reality. Okay, welcome back. Just enough time to do the media quiz. Let's see how much attention you've been paying to the media news this week. This week's quiz is called Back to Life, Back to Reality. 3 stories where the subject at the centre is coming back to a screen or speaker near you. You just tell me who or what they are. It's very easy. You'll pick it up. It's the best of 3. Buzz in with your name if you know the answer. So Alex, you will say...
Alex.
Maggie, you will say...
Maggie.
Let's play Back to Life, Back to Reality. Okay, question number 1. Who has been allowed to return to the White House?
Oh, Alex.
Yes.
The Associated Press.
Correct. Yes. A judge has ordered Trump's White House to lift access restrictions following, this is the Gulf of America controversy.
Yes.
They want to call it by the name it's been for quite a while, the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see whether he follows any of the instructions of the courts. It would be strange if the rejecting the judiciary came from the AP. That would be a strange one.
Yeah, it's a judge he appointed, though, isn't
Yes.
he? Yeah.
We'll see how well he does. Okay, question number 2. What did a group of ex-local radio presenters launch this week?
Oh, help. I don't know.
A rocket. Into space. Are they going into space?
Sadly, they're not going into space.
Alex, are they going into space?
Incorrect.
Right.
They're launching a podcast. Everyone's doing it this week. It's called Frequency Funhouse, featuring different guests with their own story to tell of their lifetime in local radio. Would you do a podcast based on your XFM years?
Oh my gosh! Sorry, just a massive flashback to. Would I? Yes. Do you know what I would? There was. I'll be completely honest. There was an XFM documentary that came out about the station. Very upset not to have been asked to be a talking head on that because. But yes, it was a crazy time, and I missed that station.
You could do maybe like a show-by-show recap, and it just lasts for a couple of hundred episodes.
But you've just done the sort of reconstruction of me to some extent in the 1980s, so I think that's enough for me.
Okay, question number 3. Which Sheffield-based drama is returning to our screens?
Oh, goodness, I can't remember.
It was apocalyptic in the 80s. It's just been shown on iPlayer recently.
Oh, Alex.
Yes.
Threads.
Yes, Threads. Have you watched... Did you watch Threads?
Do you know what? I did. But that whole bit... Very quickly, my 80s was defined by things like this. I read Raymond Briggs' When the Wind Blows.
Yes.
And after reading that as a child in the 80s, my biggest fear, I used to look out of my bedroom window and imagine seeing a mushroom cloud on the horizon and realising I had seconds to live. So I find it very interesting that now of all times they choose to bring this back.
This is potentially a reboot of Threads, whether it's a film, more likely going to be a TV series by Warp Films. Okay, and that makes Alex our winner. Congratulations.
Don't worry, Alex, I never win.
As a special prize, you get to do some more research into the XFM documentary. We want
Thank you.
Show-by-show recap.
I will.
Come back with the plan. And how can people keep up with what you're up to? I guess it's the podcast is the main thing.
Yes. It's all on my Instagram at Alex Zane.
And Maggie, anything exciting coming up for you?
Yes, I'm stuck in writing something which I wish I hadn't agreed to do, and so I am a little bit frightened, I think is the word, of the project ahead of me. But I hope that I will regain my kind of normal drive. As you say, it's very important, and I shall complete my task.
Well, we like that sell. We look forward to reading it very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for being a part of the Media Club too. Remember to sign up at our Substack. It's free. Just go to themediaclub.com. You get a free email from us every week with details about the show, plus links to all of our stories. So even if you can't listen one week, you can read all about it as well. Just sign up for free at themediaclub.com. I was the host, Matt Deegan. The producer was Matt Hill. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. I'll see you next time.